from takeoff until...
Operating from high altitude, its E-3 AWACS are able to scan the skies over a huge area.
And command post, Magic 55, radar detection, North Sarajevo, low speed. Mission ID.
The AWACS, codenamed Magic, always works with two fighters on combat air patrol. Magic will send them to intercept and check any suspect flights. But this vital operation was manipulated by the Americans in order to do exactly what it was designed to stop: make covert, embargo-busting flights over Bosnia. On the 10th of February 1995, Norwegian Air Force Captain Ivan Moldestad was visiting Unprofor in Tuzla. The local base was at a complex called the Blue Factory.
I'm up in Tuzla. I tried once in a while to get up for a weekend with my colleagues and friends for some R&R. And it's Friday night, and we've been in the mess hall for dinner, and I'm walking out with my CO. It's dark, it's a clear evening. And as we walk out, we face directly towards Tuzla city, or Tuzla town. And what I see is, I see two fighter aircrafts, twin-engined, lit up like a Christmas tree. Afterburners, nav lights, strobes, everything, flying in circles over the city, about 3,000 feet. And this is very strange for me. They normally fly about 25,000 feet or higher. At night, all lights are off, so nobody can see them. You can just hear them. And when I saw this, I saw that something was wrong. So I go into the Squadron Operations Center, and I call down to my colleagues in Sarajevo, who is dealing with the fighter planes from AOCC. And I speak to the duty officer, a good friend of mine, a British Tornado pilot. And I just ask him to confirm friendly over Tuzla. And he says, stand by. He checks his papers, comes back, and he says, no, there is nothing flying tonight. NATO is not operating tonight for some reason.
Of course, saying that NATO wasn't flying is not the same as saying the skies are empty. As Moldestad and his colleagues watched the US Navy's improvised display, they were about to realize it was no more than a sideshow to the main event.
One of our guards comes running over to me and he goes, sir, did you see the other aircraft? And I'm looking at them now. No, the one that came behind here, the big one. I said, what do you mean? Oh, there was a big aircraft coming behind Blue Factory towards Tuzla Air Base. And I asked him if he could identify the aircraft in any way. Was it a jet aircraft, a propeller aircraft? And the only thing he could say, it was a Hercules-type aircraft. And to his knowledge, that was all he could say. And it was low and flying towards Tuzla Air Base. Tuzla Air Base is closed. It's been closed for years.
Word of the incident soon spread rapidly up the Unprofor chain of command to Sarajevo and then on to Zagreb.
I remember one morning in an operation room where a message came in. It must have been in the beginning of February, I believe. But a British officer was on call, and he reported a plane that had probably landed on Tuzla Air Base in the middle of the night. And it was very silent afterwards, and those who usually spoke up said nothing. And the next morning, when questions was asked about this, there were no comments at all, and they said it must have been a misunderstanding. But we were not in doubt at all that a drop had taken place in Tuzla. Of course, we were not told who did it, but we had our suspicions.
When Moldestad got back to Sarajevo, Unprofor's new commander, British Army General Sir Rupert Smith, called him to his office.
He got a bit upset to say it that way. He ordered me not to talk to anybody about this at all. He says it's a very serious incident, and if anybody had any queries about it, that they were to contact him personally.
Later that month, Maldestad and a number of colleagues flew from Sarajevo to the airbase at Vicenza in northern Italy. What was scheduled as a routine meeting between NATO and the UN turned out to be a lesson in the arrogance of power.
And we go into the meeting room, and his name was Colonel Cooper. He starts the meeting with something like, you know, I wish UNPROFOR would stop seeing all these unidentified flying objects, and I would really like to meet the people that has initiated this bullshit. And it made me a bit angry, so I raise my hand and I tell him that I am the one who reported this, where he is appears to be a bit surprised.
Maldestad was told to see the chief UN liaison officer at Vicenza, a Dutch general.
As I'm in there, Colonel Cooper comes into the office, and he says to the general, you know, excuse me, sir, but we need to talk to this officer. And whereupon the Dutch general replies, well, can't you see I'm talking to him now? And Cooper grabs my arm and he says, well, I think we're more important than you in this matter. And he leads me out of the office.
Maldestad was then interrogated by a group of senior American officers.
It's quite scary to find yourself in a situation like this. What I remember is that I gave them very vague answers to their questions, and I referred them to General Rupert Smith. As I walk down the corridor, I meet another UN officer, a Norwegian one, who, as I pass him, puts a piece of paper down inside my jacket, and he's looking a bit distressed about it, and he says, read it on the aircraft on your way home. And I try to reach for it, and he says, not now, don't take it out before you're on the aircraft. As we take off, I take up this piece of paper, and it is NATO's flying program for the 10th of February, Friday the 10th of February. It's a classified document. Where he's got it from, I have absolutely no idea. But I'm sure he was not meant to have it.
The document records that at 5 p.m. magic had been stood down. It was replaced by a US Navy E-2 Hawkeye, the smaller, carrier-borne AWACS. This was not magic. This was manipulation. 1 hour later, 2 F-18s took off from the same American carrier. These were the 2 twin-engined fighters seen flying low over Tuzla by Maldestad and his colleagues.
This indicates to me that during this incident, this evening, not NATO, but the Americans were controlling the entire Bosnian airspace on their own.
An intelligence report on the mysterious incident was written by a British Army officer based at UN Sector Northeast headquarters at Tuzla Air Base.
I think if you don't know what is going on the ground and what people are doing, then
Lieutenant Colonel Christopher Lahardy got to the heart of the matter when he wrote that
the mission was carried out with the consent and support of the authorities commanding the AWACS and other aircraft in the air at that time.
In other words, the Americans. An inquiry team was set up by NATO. It was staffed only by senior US Air Force officers. Meanwhile, cables passed between UN headquarters in New York, NATO in Brussels, and Vicenza Air Base. Some of these classified documents have reached correspondent. We asked Ken Connor to review the file. Connor, a 23-year veteran of the British SAS, is a leading expert on the planning and execution of covert operations. The secret drops near Tuzla Air Base were made at a highway airstrip known as Tuzla West. The airstrip was little more than a very wide, straight stretch of public road. Some years ago, that road was taken over by the US Army for helicopter flight operations and renamed Comanche Base. On the airstrip, Ken Connor told me how the covert airdrops had been carried out.
About 3 kilometres down that way, there is a lake, which is the final navigational marker for the crew. Once they see that, they will then be able to pick up the drop zone lights. They come in about 400 feet. The stores on the aircraft are on pallets, they're on rollers. And once they hit the lake, they're going to do it. They take the final restraining straps off. As the aircraft comes, it slightly nose up, its flaps are down, it's making a lot of noise, flying at about 250 knots. The drogue chute goes, the pallets go, the aircraft picks up speed and disappears. But once the pallets hit, the chutes break away and drift off, the strobe lights are flickering, the orders are given, the work parties come out to pick up the load, put them on trucks, and within a matter of a few short minutes, the area is clear and off they go.
General George Joulwan was Supreme Allied Commander Europe, the head of the military side of NATO, throughout 1994 and 95. How could it have been possible for Operation Deny Flight to have been stood down on the nights of the airdrops without the approval of NATO at the very highest level?
We had no information that that was taking place, personally. Just to make it clear that what was coming to me as a Supreme Allied Commander was that we had no confirmation that this was taking place. What I was doing had nothing to do with what the State Department or CIA was doing.
In spite of the evidence, America denied resupplying the BIH army in breach of the UN arms embargo. Correspondent decided to approach senior Muslim officers and ask them about the drops. General Hazim Shadic was commander of 2 corps in the Tuzla region until late in 1994. He admitted he'd planned the drop zone. So were the logistics men based right around the perimeter, or were they in different parts?
We had the task of preventing civilians from coming to this location in order to protect them from injury. Secondly, we had to attend these drops regularly at certain locations. And after collecting the cargo, take it to the warehouse.
Šarić could tell us no more about the drops. He was sent to Turkey as military attaché. The UN Sector Northeast report, written by Lieutenant Colonel Lahadi, contained another intriguing piece of information.
At 2025 Alpha, an armoured patrol reached the Tuzla Highway Strip. Cargo handling activity was observed. 5 heavy trucks, BIH personnel and some cargo on the ground was identified by the use of night vision goggles. On their way back to the airbase, the armoured patrol was fired on by BIH soldiers.
We asked contacts in Tuzla which unit of the BIH army had attacked the patrol. They told us to look for the man on the right in these photographs. Brigadier Refik Bojanovic, former commander of the Black Wolves Special Forces unit, was in charge of security for the airdrops. It was his soldiers who'd shot at the UN patrol. Concerned about his personal security, Bojanovic proved difficult to track down. We finally caught up with him in Switzerland. Bojanovic confirmed that the Americans organized the covert operation.
I understood that Americans are leading these operations because before any airdrops took place, there were American planes flying over the region.
Help was at hand on the ground, too.
When we were offloading these aircraft, there were civilians who were talking English. I do not know if they were Americans, but they were speaking English.
Some days after the drops, an aid worker was driving along a road close by Tuzla airstrip. He was taken by a call of nature.
I found a nice place to stop in front of I could say it was a big garage with 2 or maybe it was 3 doors on the front, and it's a good place to park outside. So then I stopped the car there and went out and around the corner and to do my thing. And then there was a small door and the door opened. And inside there I saw 3 guys sitting, and I knew them. I talked to them, I've seen them, and I knew they were American. And looking into 2 boxes that was a little bit shorter than 2 meters, and since I was sitting on it, it was approximately the height of a chair, 40, 50, maybe 60 centimeter high, and maybe the same width of it. And it was green, so it was not an ordinary box, it was some special kind of box. And one of them that was nearest to me just jumped up and smashed the door in and locked it. I was very confused. I knew this guy and I talked to them many times.
6 years after the incident, this man still fears for his safety.
They were big packages, and inside there were boxes on which it was written US Army. Mainly grey, although there was some green.
The boxes contained valuable Stinger ground-to-air missiles and anti-tank guided weapons to be used against the superior army of the Bosnian Serb army. Bojanovic also told us that this man was involved in arranging the covert supply of weapons from Iran. He was the Bosnian military attaché in the Turkish capital of Ankara. General Hazim Shadic, it seems, had not told us all he knew. We then asked Bojanovic to name the most senior American involved in what was called Operation Rescue.
I remember Jim Campbell. Before he came to Bosnia, his people were scouting the region for this operation. The name of his assistant was Jack Collins.
Jim Campbell turned out to be Major General James L. Campbell of the US Army. We asked his commanding officer to comment.
I don't think he was with NATO. He may have been with the U.S. Army in Europe, but not with NATO.
As well as being commander of NATO, General Jules Wan was also commander of all US forces in Europe. By the way, he was Campbell's boss.
I have no idea what his tasking was, and I don't know. You'll have to ask General Campbell.
It seems remarkable that General Jules Wan was uninformed about the activities of one of his most senior staff officers.
I had no idea that he was involved in these covert operations. If he was involved in that, I had no knowledge of it.
Far from ending the conflict,